Hey writers, you're listening to the Kobo Rewriting Life podcast, where we highlight an episode from our backlist that will bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. I'm your host, Tara Kremen, Director of Kobo Writing Life. Today's episode is an interview with author Julie Evelyn Joyce from 2019. Julie was the winner of the Kobo Emerging Writer Prize in the romance genre, and I wanted to highlight this episode as inspiration because we've recently announced that romance is the rotating genre for the 2025 prize. If you're not familiar, each year Kobo hosts the Emerging Writer Prize, which endeavours to raise the profiles of debut Canadian authors by recognising exceptional books in 3 categories: literary fiction, non-fiction, and genre fiction. A different genre is showcased each year, and this year it is romance. The winners receive a $20,000 Canadian cash prize and marketing and communication support from Kobo. Submissions close March 13th, so if you're a debut Canadian author, you have until then to submit your book. One of my favourite parts of this prize is the fact that I get to help whittle down the list of entries. All the book nerds at Kobo, and let's be real, that's nearly everyone, get to help with the judging of the entries, and I've read so many great books as part of this throughout the years, including Julie's book, Steeped in Love. I hope you enjoy this episode.
So in this episode, we're talking to Julie Evelyn Joyce. She is the winner of Kobo's Emerging Writer Prize for the romance category for her title, Steeped in Love.
I love this book. It was really cute. It was about this woman that was looking for love by reading tea leaves, tasseography. And while this is happening, she encounters a grumpy writer who's suffering from writer's block.
And also wondering why she's basically interviewing all these guys in this coffee shop.
Yeah, doesn't think she'll find love, but maybe she
does. I don't know. So we also talked to her about how Gilmore Girls fan fiction inspired her to write this novel.
Yeah, and how you can feel echoes of Gilmore Girls throughout it. How she balances being a teacher and writing. And then also how a chance meeting at RWA actually sparked the interest in finishing this novel and entering Kobo's Emerging Writers Prize.
It's a great interview, so please keep listening. So thank you, Julie, so much for joining us on the Kobo Writing Life podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
And you're actually a finalist, a winner of the Kobo as Emerging Writer Prize.
Damn, I'm still shocked about it too.
Yeah?
It's surreal and wonderful, and I'm still buzzing with excitement. It's just been amazing.
So we'll get more into that a bit later. So just to start off, can you tell our listeners a bit about you?
Sure, absolutely. I am a Canadian girl living here in Ottawa. I teach full-time as a physical education teacher, high school, which is a challenge in and of itself. But I love what I do. It's incredibly inspiring to me, and so inspiring that I have so much material to use for books, and I'm stimulated in a wonderful way every day, and then I go home and I kind of channel all that energy into more creative thoughts and processes, and I write down some of the things like anecdotes or little things that kind of happen throughout the day, and it's just a wonderful feeling. So when I'm not teaching, I spend a lot of time playing sports. As a phys ed teacher, that's kind of part of the gig. And when I'm not playing sports, I do a lot of watching sports. I buy athletic shoes by the boatload.
What are your favorites?
Yes, I admit I have a problem. I just love spending time enjoying the city. I go out and I tour around. I go along the canal. I run. I hike. I go out on the water, dragon boating, and whatever else I can, and just make use of every amenity here in beautiful Ottawa, the most active city I've ever been in my life.
You seem very busy.
Yeah. I don't know how I'm writing.
I mean, that's what I was going to ask. Like, so this is your debut novel. Like, how did you find time to complete it?
You know, it wasn't easy. I'll admit that. And I think every writer knows, who's ever tried to write a book, that it's not easy. It's a really difficult task. It requires a ton of discipline and dedication. And this was a novel that took quite a couple years in the making, but it just didn't start there. I've been creative writing for more than a decade. Been working on my craft. I started out writing fan fiction, and I really, through that, I developed the skills to be a writer. And I started listening to what other people were suggesting, and I had fans that were following me, and I thought, what a cool thing for this to happen. And then part of me was like, but this isn't entirely mine. And I couldn't wait for the day where I had something that was totally mine that I could put out there and get that same kind of response. And throughout those years, I kept working on my own skills as a writer. I kept working on learning the ins and outs of the publishing world, because that's a whole other story unto itself. And my critique partner, my fabulous friend who's been with me from the beginning, she blazed the trail and showed me it was possible. She became published, and I was just in awe of that and had to feel that same experience for myself. So I followed suit, and she was instrumental in helping me get this book written and just develop my skills as a writer.
Nice. So I want to ask, was your fan fiction sports related?
Yeah, I want to know what your fan fiction was it?
Ironically not. I started writing Gilmore Girls fan fiction, which is interesting because I feel like Steeped in Love, my debut, has a lot of that small town quirkiness in it. And I have such an affection for the minor characters in the story. That show just turned my world upside down. It just made so much joy in my life, and I've made my best friends in the world because of that show. So I can always be grateful that it came into my life when it did, and it changed my life. I wouldn't be here without that show because it made me want to be a writer.
I mean, the writing on that show is excellent. I will say that.
It's that witty, like fast-paced dialogue that I just fell in love with, and I try to emulate that a little bit in my own writing, and it's fun. It makes writing fun.
I haven't watched the Gilmore Girls, but perhaps I should.
Oh my gosh, you have to add that to your list immediately.
I know. I'm going to say that it didn't make it to Ireland. It totally did. I just missed it. But I can definitely vouch for the small town vibe of your book. I had the pleasure of reading it at the beach this weekend, and it was just the perfect, like, lounging on the sand. Like, I very much enjoyed it. Can you give us sort of like a brief synopsis, like, of the story?
Of course. I always struggle with this part because then, like, I go on a tangent and I'm like giving the whole plot away, and I'll try to keep it concise. Essentially, the story is about a woman who's in her 30s who's struggled to find the one and has tried every other method of dating that exists. It's familiar to my own personal life, and is frustrated with the lack of progress on that front. And so one night she's at home and she's living in a house that her deceased great aunt passed on to her, and hears the voice of her great aunt inside her saying, like, try something different, try tea leaves. Like, this idea just gets infused into her brain, and she's like, well, I've got nothing else to lose here. Her great aunt had taught her the art of reading tea leaves. She left her all the readings and the books that she had on the subject, and they used to talk about it all the time as she was growing up. And finally she's turning to this as a real source to try to find the guy. And so it kind of follows her on her many adventures, good and bad, with dates in a local coffee shop. And in that same coffee shop is a struggling novelist who has really had a difficult time finding the words to get into his next manuscript, and is struggling to find his voice as a writer. He feels like he needs to be like everybody else, instead of just being his own true self. And he starts to eavesdrop on all these dates that she has, and is fascinated by how she's dismissing all these hopeful bachelors in like 20 minutes and wondering like, what's wrong with her? What's wrong with these guys? What is going on here? And so we kind of learn as the book goes along that it's not about these words and these voices inside our head and these feelings that we have that what we're doing isn't okay. It's more about following your heart and following your gut and not listening to those outside forces as much, letting them influence you to a degree, but it's ultimately about who you want to be and what book you want to write and what person you really want to fall for. So that's hopefully a concise-ish way of explaining.
I loved the eavesdropping aspect in the coffee shop because that's one of my favorite games to play here in Toronto. It's like you can spot a first date a mile away and you're like, that's a first date for sure.
Oh, I know. I love that too. And I found that once I had started writing this book and now that I've finished the book, I do that so much more. I'm just so much more attuned to that when I'm out places and I'll point it out to people and they're just like, why are you doing that?
I love people watching. It's my favorite. Favorite activity.
Bunch of creeps. That's all.
Every good writer does a little bit of eavesdropping. You get those ideas from interactions that you have, but interactions that you witness too. And that stimulates the thought processes in your mind, and great scenes are created because of it.
Did you have to do a lot of research about learning how to read tea leaves, or is that something you already knew before?
Sorry, can I just point out that Steph is scared to say the words?
Yeah. Tassography?
Tassiography?
Tassiography, yeah.
Tassiography. Listen.
I'll be honest, I didn't know a lot about it prior to writing this book, but I did do a lot of research about it because it was something that really interested me. And I read blogs about it. I read one woman's journey and actually reading them and helping to see how that was predictive of her own life and the choices that she made. And it was very interesting to me because she kind of came to the same conclusion that it wasn't necessarily what she was reading the leaves. It was more what the leaves said that and how her interpretation of that kind of changed her mindset. So maybe you're seeing something different. Maybe everyone would see something different in the same pattern. But how do you react to what you see? Do you let it control you? Do you ignore it? Do you manipulate it in your mind? And so that sort of started to play out in my own mind and how I can use that as an influence in the story. But also, interestingly enough, there was a little piece in this book, and it features a lot more in my sequel, about palm reading. And I actually had my palm read while I was in New York City with a couple of my girlfriends for research purposes. I can write that one off. And I found it so interesting because she told me things and she started getting me to think about things I wouldn't have without whether they were true or not. So one of the things she mentioned during the reading was that the guy I'm meant to be with is someone that's already in my life. And so it wasn't just something that I thought, oh, okay, cool, and like let it go. I was like, who do I know that I haven't given a proper chance to really know? Or maybe someone's like quietly pining for me and I don't know. I mean, every girl can dream, right? Mm-hmm. And so I really started to examine those aspects of my life that I normally wouldn't have. So without that reading, I probably wouldn't have looked into my own personal life as deeply as I did. And I think the same thing can be true with the leaves and what she's seeing. And it makes her think differently and more deeply about certain things than she normally would have. You can't really take everything they say with 100% truth. But I think it was just a fun experience. And some of what she did say was really kind of neat and interesting to hear and comforting, other than the fact that she said, I'll never be rich. I was like, I choose to ignore that.
We have to hook Steph and I up because we're going to New York for RWA next week. So maybe we can get our palms read.
I mean, we're already getting our aura photo taken, so we have plans.
I want to see what color my aura is.
Yeah.
I wish I was going now and I can hang out with you guys.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you could still come.
Last year and the year before that, but this year I'm just taking a little time off, and I should be back next year if you guys are going again.
Sweet.
I've never been to RWA, so
well, that's a good segue into the Emerging Writers Prize, because RWA had a sort of impact for you.
Yes, well, absolutely. So the Emerging Writer Prize. So do you want me to just talk about like how it all came to be?
Yeah.
Okay. So last year I met a woman because of a group of friends I had at RWA. So one of my good friends is Kristen Higgins. And so I think it was the last day actually that we were all there, she invited a group of us out to dinner. And one of those women sat next to me, and I hadn't ever met her before, but I'd heard of her and I'd seen her and maybe interacted with her a little bit on Twitter. But she sat next to me and she was really interested in like my journey as a writer and what I'd been working on. And I hadn't yet published Steeped in Love, but she was really curious to know like how I was going to go about doing that. And she was a hybrid author, so she had a lot of insight into how to become an indie author and the ins and outs of all of that. So we had a really good conversation, and at the end of it, she gave me her card and she said, keep in touch and let me know if you ever need any help. And always in the back of your mind, you're grateful for that, but you're like, oh, okay. And, you know, a lot of people along the way will say the same thing, and you don't really expect necessarily to hear from them again. Well, I ended up publishing the book a few months later. And the following year, so at the beginning of this year, in January, she reached out via, I think it was on Facebook, and told me about the Kobo Emerging Writer Prize and said, does this fit with you? Is this relevant to you? And I said, yes, very much so. This is amazing. I hadn't heard of it before. And that immediate moment, I went online and I filled out the form and I wrote a little spiel about why I thought I was deserving and my book was deserving, and just put it aside and crossed my fingers and hoped and prayed. And I, right after, I sent her a message and thanked her profusely. And I said, no matter what, I'm so grateful to you for pointing this out, because, I mean, it's not something that's relevant to her, but she didn't have to tell me either. And for her to do that meant the world to me. And so lo and behold, I became a finalist, and I told her very soon after I found out and thanked her again. And I said, I cannot believe this. And I would not be here without you. I'm so grateful to you. And when I did actually win, I told her, I am taking you out to dinner. I'm spoiling you so hard for this. This is incredible. And wow, like how great that it all just came to be. But I was talking to my dad about this too, how all of the things kind of fell into place, how I was there at the right time, how I became friends with Kristen back in 2015 because of my Ottawa romance chapter, and I joined that chapter because I moved to Ottawa to teach, and so all these people that came into my life at the right time for the right reasons, it's almost like it was meant to be. So it's amazing to me to think about it.
It was really nice to meet your dad at the Emerging Writers Prize. I think that like your thank you speech had all of us with a little bit of a tear in our eye. Like it was really cute.
My dad's still crying.
I loved the picture of you taking the giant book cover home on the subway. Like that was the best.
Yeah, Dad's got it, like holding it proud. We honestly probably sold like 5 copies, just him holding it on the GO train. And oh, what's that? And
great marketing.
Yeah, like it's a prize-winning book.
He was absolutely thrilled. For days after, he would just like randomly yell, "Woohoo! Woohoo!"
Oh.
And then the next day, I of course, I went in to cash my check right away.
You got to put that in the bank.
Exactly. And then immediately after, I took him out to Red Lobster for a big feast, and we had appetizers and fancy drinks and like lobster and shrimp and dessert, and it was amazing. And it was such a nice feeling to get to do that and not care, it was just, this is how I want to celebrate in the first most important way with my biggest cheerleader. So it was amazing.
That's really awesome. Glad that you got to do that, and glad that Kobo was ever able to kind of give that to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so grateful for all of you and for Kobo for existing. And I feel like it's honestly such a positive kind of site that's out there right now to help authors, especially indie authors. I find I've never felt that kind of support anywhere else, and to have this prize on top of it is just like it's such a redeeming kind of thing, and I'm honored in so many levels to be the chosen one, I guess.
Nice. So let's maybe go back a little bit about what made you want to self-publish in the first place. Like, so you're writing this book after you've moved on from your terrific Gilmore Girls nonfiction, fan fiction.
Get it right.
Yeah.
Well, I actually dabbled a little bit in writing under a pen name a few years back. So I first became published for short stories under a different pen name.
Were those romance stories as well?
They were erotic romance stories.
Oh.
Yes. So I had probably about 2 or 3 years. I was with a small publisher, and unfortunately, through the difficult times of publishing, they weren't able to maintain themselves, and they had to disband. All my rights were returned to me, and at that point, I had to kind of question if I wanted to continue and write short stories and be under this cartoon image, or did I want to write something different and be myself? And I had to, of course, get rid of the erotic side, lest I get fired from my job.
I keep forgetting you're a teacher, yeah.
So I wanted it to be something I could shout from the rooftops. If a student ever caught wind, it would be okay. If my colleagues wanted to buy the books and support me, then that would be awesome. And I thought, and I'm not taking anything away from erotic romance. I love it, and I read it voraciously. I always will, but it just wasn't right for me, and it wasn't maybe the niche for me as a writer. And so I did a lot of soul searching, and I also spoke a lot to my mother, who was still alive at the time. And she always encouraged me to write that big book. She knew there was a big book inside me. And so one day I just sat down and I talked about it with my critique partner, and I shout out to Maggie Wells, by the way, who's awesome. And she helped me unveil this idea about the tea leaves, and we sort of formulated this story idea together. And in that conversation, I knew, like, this is a big book. This is the book that I have to write. And I started writing it. And it was a couple months into that process that I lost my mom. And I kept pushing through despite all that, because it was going to be a gift to her no matter what. And if I couldn't share it with her, then I was going to share it with the world. So I kept pushing. I kept getting through the muck and the difficult task of just typing that. And then that book just, it just wasn't hitting the mark. It wasn't hitting the mark with publishers. It wasn't hitting the mark with agents. And I didn't know for sure if it was really done. When I originally finished it, or thought I had finished it, it was about 32,000 words. And that was the biggest book I'd ever written. But at the time, publishers were looking for something bigger. And it seemed like I was always just like a fraction behind the times. And so again, I went to the drawing board and brainstormed again with my critique partner. And we were able to find stuff and other interesting bits and pieces, and decided in the end that it should be a series. Originally, I thought it would just be a standalone. And so I started pulling in some different characters. I started to think of, and Kristen actually gave me this idea, but to make it sort of like a Love Actually feeling, where you get to meet certain characters and they make an impact on the hero and the heroine, but they don't stay. And they don't really play a key role until later books. But everyone sort of knows everyone, and everyone's sort of interconnected in some way. So again, I finished this book, and I started firing it off to publishers and editors and agents. And lo and behold, it again, I guess, was missing something for all of them in some way. And I got to a point where I said, it doesn't matter at this point whether anybody else wants it. This is the book that I want. This is the book that I want to publish, even if it has to be me that publishes it. And I was terrified to self-publish, because it was the fear of the unknown. You know, I wasn't the first person to step into that territory by a long shot, but I've always sort of had this fear of technology, I guess, and learning a whole new system. And I just felt like there was this mountain ahead of me after I slaved away on this book. But nothing mattered more to me than getting it out into the world. And so I just buckled down. Again, my critique partner helped me a lot with that, but I also had other people who were really helpful and who were already indie authors. One in particular, my friend Melanie, gave me this Bible that she created for indie authors that gave like a step-by-step of what you need to do and when and how. And like, it made a world of difference. And instead of doing it all at once, I just do one thing at a time. And then I felt like, okay, I can do this. I'm not overwhelmed anymore. And I went through each step. My critique partner created an incredible cover for me, and we worked together to write a blurb that worked for the book. And all these people combined helped me to get to the point where I was finally ready to press that button and put it out there for the world. And I mean, as you can see, it's not just an immediate thing. It's a long process, and you have to decide yourself if you want to be traditional or not. I mean, sometimes you have to make that choice. And I have nothing against either side of the platform there, but I have so much more respect for indie authors, knowing the work that it takes to get to this point and how supportive that community is. I'm so grateful to everybody for all the help that they gave me.
I feel like you're the example of how every indie author helps each other to like succeed.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I honestly would not be here without that help, without those people guiding me along the way who'd been there and done that and weren't just keeping it to themselves. They were ready and waiting to share with the next person. So I feel much more willing, of course, now to do the same thing. Not that I wouldn't have before, but it's just that idea of paying it forward. When somebody does something so kind for you, you just automatically want to help the next person.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the reasons that we love working with indie authors so much as well, is that like everyone's just so helpful, and like there's a little bit of competition, but not really. Like
I feel like they all just want everyone to succeed. Like we
do
yeah.
for sure.
They're like, there's enough room for all of our books.
I think there is.
And everyone's so willing to celebrate when one of their own gets recognized, and when this award, of course, it was a huge deal, and it just gives more relevance to indie authors, and it makes you feel like, okay, this is legit. Like we're on even keel with traditional published authors.
It was awesome to see so many indies nominated as well this year. Like, it was great.
Oh yes, I loved seeing that as well, and I've actually become good friends with some of the fellow finalists in my category, and we're supportive of each other because we know we're on that same journey. So it's been wonderful.
Awesome. Nice. So I guess the question that I want to ask is, what drew you to romance genre? Because like that's a big self-published genre, but And as you said, a lot of people help you. So I just wondered why you picked romance.
Well, I have long been a fan of romance. I was actually asked this question the other day for another interview I was doing, but they were asking me the book that kind of shaped me as a young girl. And I talked about Anne of Green Gables because, I mean...
Just like your Canadian
very
coverall.
But that series really was a romance in a lot of ways. And it had that whole small town vibe again. And it had the quirky characters. But ultimately, I loved that book because of Anne and Gilbert and that rivalry that turned into romance. And so from there, I just was so drawn into that genre. I remember as a teenager, I found my mom's stash of romance novels. I would go through those when no one was around, and I started to kind of get a feel for what it meant and what it took to write a book like that. And it didn't probably really set in fully until I was in my 20s. And then I really started to delve deep into the romance genre. I developed a lot of authors that were go-to authors for me. And once Amazon became a thing, like I was just shelling out money all the time to get my Kindle loaded with all my favorite romances. When free books were all the rage, I just like added so many books onto that and just read one after the next. Series became a thing, and like the same thing, I just would add every book by the same author if there's an appeal to me about their books. There's just something so exciting and I guess hopeful about romance as a category, as a genre. I mean, it's just it always leaves you in with a happy ending, of course, but it's just that journey along the way that you know that the character's going to change. They're going to learn something about themselves. Ultimately, they're going to get some sort of happy realization in the end. They'll start in one way and they'll get their happily ever after. And to me, especially as a single person, I sort of find that I like to live vicariously through that. And I like to create those worlds where we can all suspend disbelief. We can all actually get fully invested in these characters and their lives. And that romance, the sparks that ignite every time that they come into the same room. There's just that feeling that you get, the butterflies, the emotions, the roller coaster that you go on with a romance that I don't feel it with any other genre. It's this amazing excitement.
Do you have any of your favorite romance books you'd like listeners to check out?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't give a nod to my critique partner, who it happens to be my favorite writer as well. Maggie Wells wrote a series of books actually, but my favorite of hers is Love Game. It's sports sort of theme, but it's about a kick-ass coach who's in the world of college athletics, who is like so fiercely dominant and not afraid to be herself. And she finds a guy who isn't afraid of who she is and celebrates who she is. And Maggie's written dozens upon dozens of books. They're all phenomenal. So I highly recommend her. Kristen Higgins, of course, is one of my go-to authors. I love her books. And I actually got an advanced copy of her newest book, which I'm just looking over here, Life and Other Inconveniences. And I'm looking forward to diving into that in the next week or so. And another big go-to author for me is, and I was super late into the game for discovering Sandra Brown, but I love Sandra Brown. I love her earlier romances, and I really love her thrillers. That's kind of my way of escaping after I'm reading the fluffy, lovely romances and the romantic comedies and the contemporary romances, and then I have like a little jolt of extra heart-pounding excitement when I read her thrillers. And one last author I'll recommend is Sarah Addison Allen. She writes books that kind of ask similar things of her readers to suspend your disbelief, that have little hints of magic throughout them. The romances are fantastic. And I feel like she had a kind of a loose impact on me in this book as well, with like the little hints of magic throughout that you kind of see with the tea leaves, and how that sets the tone throughout the book. So those would be the ones I'd recommend for now.
It's a good list.
Thanks.
What are you working on now? You're working on the sequel to Steeped in Love?
I am, yes. The sequel's called Learning to Love, and it features one of the characters that's actually mentioned toward the end of Steeped in Love. She's a high school phys ed teacher.
Whoa.
And the book is set very much in that life of a high school teacher. So there's a lot of scenes that happen at the school that she works in. But one thing of note is the fact that this school is a difficult school. It's for kids who have struggled a lot, and there are a lot of behavioral issues and kids who need a lot more help than others. And so that's a big part of the book. Also, the fact that her romantic love interest happens to be a man who originally started out in the big bad world of advertising and decided later in life that he wanted to become a teacher. Oh. So he ends up as a student teacher at this school. And so when she's hearing of this student teacher that's coming, automatically she assumes that it's going to be a young guy. He ends up being younger, but not what she expected. And it's kind of a forbidden romance in the beginning because she's his superior, and there can't be any, hanky-panky going on while he's working there. So it adds a lot of tension, conflict, and he comes from a very different background than she does. He's a very affluent kind of person. He went to a prep school. He knows a very different life than she grew up in. And she lived a very similar life to some of these kids that she teaches. So they come from those different backgrounds with that added layer of conflict. And he's coming in for very different reasons than she has to be a teacher herself. So there's a lot to work with there, but I'm having a blast writing it, and I cannot wait to share that book. And hopefully I have plans to have it released early in 2020.
2020. Okay,
awesome.
Gonna note that in our diary now.
Yeah.
And what's the final trilogy theme going to be like? Do you have it decided yet?
I do actually. So I didn't mention it, but so in the second book, I know I talked about it earlier, but so the key theme for that one is the palm reading. So that becomes much more of a prevalent theme. In the final book, I also mentioned the characters in the final book in Steeped as well. So it has very clear Gilmore Girls influences in it. The big burly lumberjack sort of character. He has a different loose vibe. Mm-hmm. And so he and his family operate something called the Tully Tree Farm. So it's going to be a Christmas themed romance. And the love of his life has moved away into the city because she was offered this job she couldn't refuse, and he waited too long to tell her how he felt, and instead of wishing her well in this new career path, he tells her that she's not going to make it and wishes that she'd just stay because the city's going to swallow her alive, and just says all the wrong things you could ever say to somebody before they're leaving. And so it's the efforts of the town, but also a little bit of, what do you call it? Mistletoe that brings them together. So it has little themes of the magic of mistletoe, but also it's the townspeople and their families and friends that all kind of try to bring these two people who should be together rightfully together.
That sounds good to me.
I'll be waiting. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy. I can't wait to share that one too. I've never written a Christmas themed book, so that'll be really exciting for me.
Yeah, well, luckily you have 6 months of winter there in Ottawa, so you got lots of inspiration.
I know, that's probably why I haven't written one, because I'm like, I don't want to look at it anymore.
Yeah, you'll probably write it in the summertime.
I got a lot to work with here.
So I guess last question there is just what advice would you give to an emerging writer? I mean, it sounds like you had some really good advice. What would you bestow upon people?
Well, I would just share some of what I was saying earlier, how this is not an easy journey, and you have to kind of know that going in. So don't expect it to all just magically fall into place. But if there's a book that you want to write, there's something that you're passionate about, if this is a dream of yours, then don't let anyone or anything stand in your way. Don't let your mind focused on doing it only one way. There are so many ways of getting your book out there and getting your voice heard. So don't let anything stand in your way. Write that book that you want to write. Just type the words, get them onto paper, and the rest will fall into place. But you've got to write the book that you want to write, and don't let anyone tell you what you should be writing. Follow your gut, as Ethan and Addie would say.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Julie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much as well. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I'm so happy to be with Kobo.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Rewriting Life podcast. If you're interested in Julie's books, we'll include links in our show notes. If you're enjoying this podcast, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. And if you're looking for more tips on growing your self-publishing business, you can find us at KoboWritingLife.com. Be sure to follow us on socials. We are at Kobo Writing Life on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter. This episode was hosted by Tara Kremen and Stephanie McGraw, with production by Terrence Abrahams. Editing is provided by Kelly Robotham, and our theme music is composed by Tearjerker. If you're ready to start your publishing journey, sign up today at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing.